you're being so hedgy cagey right now. You don't want a couple. Do you honestly think there should be no perimeter around the
I have a
president?
right to drive a battleship around the president.
We are the Arms Journeys. Today we are talking about the gun-free zone that roams around the country, constantly encircling the President of the United States. We're going to talk about what the law is when it comes to that presidential gun-free zone. We're going to talk about whether or not this is constitutional. And finally, is there ever an acceptable gun-free zone? But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
And so we got this question from some folks in the comment section, and no surprise of what kind of started this entire conversation was the recent attempt on former President Donald Trump's life. And so it raised some questions about, hey, when the United States Secret Service establishes a perimeter or grounds, how does that affect gun rights? Can they actually restrict these things? Is it constitutional? And so I thought it'd just be best if we start with the law right off the bat. That's 18 U.S.C. 1752. So anytime we're in Title 18 of the United States Code, that's where our crimes live. And I'll just read out the relevant portions real quick. So it says that whoever knowingly enters or remains in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority to do so, or attempts or conspires to do so, shall be punished as provided by subsection B. That's where we have our penalties. It says generally it's punishable by up to a year in jail unless the person possessed a firearm or caused serious bodily injury. At that point, jumps up to a possible term of imprisonment of up to 10 years. And where they loop in, protected persons, think president, think vice president, think people who are under the protection of the Secret Service. The term restricted building or grounds means any posted, cordoned off, or otherwise restricted area of a building grounds where the president or other person protected by the Secret Service is or will be temporarily visiting. So that's where our law lives. And I looked up to see, how frequently is this law getting used? Well, our most recent example is a handful of people who carried into the Capitol on January the 6th. And so this law seems to be in full force and effect. Sometimes we have some laws that are kind of sitting there, aren't ever used, but these appear to be actually being used.
They are. So that is our general law. I think that an interesting question is, do you think that there is text, history, and tradition to support this as a restriction on the Second Amendment, Richard?
Ooh, we're going to get some heat for this one. And so we look at our test, and that's what Emily is referring to, under New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. We look at the text of the Second Amendment as informed by history and tradition, and we look at, all right, the Second Amendment holds back the federal government from infringing on our right to keep and bear arms. But the Supreme Court, as late as New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, said, hey, guess what? Some restrictions are permissible, even under the Second Amendment, so long as they comport with something that would have been regulated at the time of the adoption of the Second Amendment in 1791. So we look towards laws that were enacted at that time or shortly thereafter. We kind of disregard things that happened before. We don't go too far in the future. We don't go to the Civil War era. We don't look at modern regulations. So we're looking right at the time of the adoption of the Second Amendment. And there is some tradition of, places of deliberation. They look at kind of where high stakes political things are taking place, and there might be an analog there. So, that's all to say. What do you think this withstands that test?
I do. I do think that there is a historical analog. Plus, I think that should something like this go through the courts for proper analysis, you are going to see anyone in the judiciary not only applying Bruin, but also a little bit of a common sense weighing of what's the public interest here versus, what is the weight upon the Second Amendment, right? Which is not part of Bruin, but you're going to have the judiciary asking that question. And that weighs in favor as well, right? I think we got a great example just very recently about why we can't have nice things around the president or former president. So you have, I think, a limited restriction on the Second Amendment, which is if you don't want to give up your gun rights, don't go within the immediate vicinity of the president. But also, I think we have a public interest in keeping the president alive. So, Richard and I have gladly participated in this, right? We were at NRA this past year and several years before. Well, Richard was there several years before I was having a baby. But You have this.
I mean, the leftist media is ready to pounce anytime the NRA convention happens because this is how it goes down every single year. People can carry into the
Hmm.
convention, they can carry all over the place.
Yep.
But when they have high profile speakers, think President Trump giving a speech, guess what?
Yep.
Secret Service creates a secure area and you can't carry your guns in there. And the
Yeah.
leftists are very quick to point out, ha ha ha, the hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
So
Nope, that's the president.
yeah,
So
and not that I think that there should be, and I think we should talk about this in a second. If you're going to restrict people's carry, I mean, there should be some remedies here, and we'll talk about that in just a
mhm.
moment. But we look at, Second Amendment. There are folks, there's lawyers even who say, hey, guess what? No infringement on the Second Amendment is permissible. I tend to agree with them, but we're looking, we work under what we got right now and the framework under New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. That's what we got right now. So applying that framework, I think we get there, not saying that's the way we want the world, but that's where we're at. And so I guess the next,
You are being so hedgy cagey right now. You don't want a couple. Do you honestly think there should be no perimeter around the
I have a
president?
right to drive a battleship around the president.
Shut the fuck.
But all right. But I think there is, and so we look at, all right, and this is where I think some of the remedy comes in. If they're going to be gun free zones, I think there has to be some shift of liability and responsibility to the people who are, quote unquote, keeping the people safe in the secure area.
Yeah, I would agree. I will say I do think that is, when we were at NRA last year, we were waiting on the president to speak. That was perhaps a failing, if you recall, because we were, I mean, disarmed at the door, right? Nobody's carrying in. The Secret Service very kindly shoved my sneakers. If you remember, I looked like a homeless lady, and the Secret Service kind
Mm-hmm.
of gave me a little bit of a hard time about it. You can't wear high heels to run around NRA, and you also can't wear sneakers to go
You
see the
also
president.
shouldn't
So you
carry a
gotta,
giant homeless lady purse.
where am I going to put my sneakers when I
Sure.
put my high heels on and go see the
I'm just
president?
saying you look like a threat.
Probably. But we got in there and waited, and President Trump wasn't there yet, and so we did sort of sit there disarmed without a whole lot of people protecting us, right?
Yeah, I mean, not that I could see. I'm sure there were folks around. But
Yeah, but not evidently. So yes, but I mean, they're absolutely. I mean, I think that is true, not just in this scenario, but in any scenario in which the government has said this is a gun-free zone, we're going to disarm you at the door. Like, you need to be on the hook if you don't protect me.
yeah, and I have seen proposals. I haven't seen in, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure I'll get fact checked on this, but there are states where I've seen proposals, and I've even seen it in Texas, where, for example, if a private business wants to put up a gun-free zone sign, well, guess what? If something goes down, you're not able to protect yourself. That business is going to be on the hook. They are going to be liable for your protection, and so they need to go take the extra steps to make sure everything's going to be safe. The thought is, hey, we're going to disincentivize these gun-free zones because we're all our own first responder. We all want to be able to defend ourselves. I think I'm a huge proponent of that stuff.
Oh yeah. And actually, I mean, although we don't have that here in Texas, we have something similar, which is that if a business chooses not to disarm people here in Texas, that cannot be held, they cannot be liable for that choice, which
Yep.
encourages businesses to let you carry in rather than sort of the converse, I guess. But it's
Yeah.
good. It's all good.
So to answer the ultimate question of is there such thing as an acceptable gun-free zone? Your opinion.
A few and far between. I think this is maybe the only one I can truly full-throatedly accept and say, yes, I am okay with this one. However, barring that, I mean, I should be able to carry in the courthouse because it is dangerous. I
Especially on
sh-
the way to the courthouse.
yes, I should be able to walk into a school if I have a license to carry and defend myself and my kids if I have to. I mean, there is, other than around the president for, I think, obvious reasons, looking at you several weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, that's the only one I can think of. What about you?
I think, yeah, I think I'm largely in agreement with the goal of, hey, we should work towards eliminating all gun-free zones. If we have a gun-free zone, we need to make sure that there are structures in place for the protection of the people that are located in
I
it.
mean, you tried to get rid of all of them in Texas.
I did.
I do remember a very excited Richard screaming and pumping his fist through downtown Austin, no more gun-free zones after that first version of constitutional carry passed in Texas.
We got pretty close to it.
We got pretty close.
But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please leave us a comment below. Do you think there should be a gun-free zone around the president? Until next time, we're the arms attorneys.